For my, there we go. It is being recorded now. Just a little bit about myself. I'm of Ojibwe and Métis ancestry. My family originates from Saugeen First Nation in Manitoba. On my mom's side, I have Irish, Scottish, and British roots. And currently I'm in my 4th year at the UBC School of Social Work Bachelor program. And today I'll be one of 2 MCs. And I'm very honored to introduce the next host for this. This is the host for today's event, which is Dr. Donna Baines. Dr. Baines has been the director of the UBC School of Social Work since 2019. So without further ado, Donna Baines.
Thank you, Sabine. Thanks very much. And thank you all very much for joining us here this evening. This event is coming to you from the unceded, traditional, and continuously inhabited territory of the Musqueam people. I warmly welcome all of you here today to the 91st year of the UBC School of Social Work and witnessing of our statement of accountability and commitment to Indigenous people. We hope we can use this time together to critically reflect on our past and build new foundations for reconciliation, decolonization, learning, and growing. Let me start by inviting Elder Doris Fox of the Musqueam people to open this event and to give an acknowledgement of the territory. Elder Fox has been a very good friend to the school on many occasions, and we once again acknowledge her contributions with gratitude. Doris?
Right, thank you, Donna. Me, it's Quatquilam, it's in Musqueam, and Doris Fox. Welcome everyone to the traditional, unceded, and continually occupied territory of the Musqueam people. We raise our hands to you in gratitude for coming to witness this great occasion. The statement of accountability has been a very important project for the UBC School of Social Work, and we raise our hands in gratitude for you coming to witness and to be a part of this unveiling. So thank you very much. I raise my hands in gratitude to you for coming in a spirit of love, honor, and friendship. We ask that you keep an open mind and an open heart so that you can learn the most from this great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Doris, for your thoughtful words and for all the work that you've done on behalf of your community and the UBC School of Social Work over several years. As an MC for this event, I also want to acknowledge the work of the many people who helped organize and coordinate this event, not the least of whom is Marie Nightbird, who is helping to keep things on track today as today's timekeeper. Marie is also monitoring the chat function for any questions or concerns that people might have. Dr. Monty Montgomery is also behind the scenes, assisting with the smooth operation of the event. With this event, we are doing our best to keep with the oral tradition of Indigenous peoples. And this is despite everything being electronically recorded as well. Due to social distancing and technological limitations, we have not invited any specific witnesses to hold memory of this event in their minds. Instead, we ask each of you to memorialize this event in your own way. I would now like to introduce several guests that the UBC School of Social Work has invited to offer some brief words. The next speaker is Dr. Santa Ono. Dr. Ono has just been reappointed as the president of UBC for his 2nd term and has worked diligently and effectively to promote equity and fairness within the university and beyond.
Hello, Sabine, I'm here.
Hello.
Hi, Sabine. Hi, Donna. Thanks, Monty and Daryl as well for everything that you've done to make today possible. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us this evening. I'm excited with the numbers that are here for this very important event. In particular, I'd like to thank the Indigenous Advisory Committee and the school for their hard work on developing this statement over the past year. It's important for us to witness this moment of reconciliation and decolonization. I view this as something that's very integral to our commitment to the Indigenous Strategic Plan. We need to recognize that critical reflection is a central part of many disciplines, but particularly in social work. And to recognize that this particular event is part of that important intellectual and social practice. We must also recognize the importance of moving forward with the Indigenous Strategic Plan that was just launched a few weeks ago, and the ways in which this event and similar events are part of our efforts to implement that plan. As Musqueam Chief Wayne Sparrow said at the launch of the Indigenous Strategic Plan, words are not enough. We must act. We must move beyond words and take meaningful action. As a center of research and learning, as a university with campuses on Musqueam and Syilx territory, and as an institution of Canadian society, UBC understands that our responsibilities do not end with the courses we offer or the efforts we've undertaken to make the university more diverse and inclusive. Meaningful reconciliation requires much more than this, and we are prepared to do that hard work. Thank you, and I'm honored to be part of this statement of accountability and commitment. Thank you very much. Sabine.
Thank you, President Ono. Our next speaker is Vice President and Provost Andrew Cersey. As Provost, Dr. Cersey has placed an emphasis on building diversity within the university and advancing educational opportunities with and for Indigenous people. Without further ado, Andrew Cersey.
Thank you, Sabine. It's my pleasure to welcome all who are present for this wonderful occasion. I'd like to say I'm delighted to acknowledge the importance of witnessing this moment of reconciliation and decolonization. Indeed, this is an early key example of moving forward with the Indigenous Strategic Plan. I'd like to thank the Indigenous Advisory Committee and the school for their hard work on developing this statement, especially over the course of your 90th anniversary year. As with all such work, no doubt there has been involved a significant amount of consultation. I know that takes patience, but it is rewarded with quality in the final product. This is an example that institutions and academic disciplines can move forward with integrity if they have the courage to reflect on their past practice and take steps to make decisive change. This is exactly what the School of Social Work is doing today with a statement of accountability and commitment. I wish you all the best and return the microphone back to Sabine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cersey. Our next speaker is our Dean, Dr. Gage Averill. Dr. Averill is on his second term as Dean of Arts and has provided strong support for human rights, diversity, inclusion, and social justice throughout his terms as Dean.
Thank you. And thank you to Elder Fox for providing her opening. And to my previous speakers, our President and Provost. I want to congratulate certainly Professor Baines, all the members of the school, and thank the Indigenous Advisory Council for their work in producing the statement that we're here to witness today. I'll note an event that helped to bookend my day today. And this was this morning's event to honor Mary Kitagawa, who was an activist who helped UBC live up to, as I noted today, it's better angels. She asked the university to recognize the Japanese Canadian students who were displaced during World War II. When she first got a less than fulsome response from the university, she persisted, and we eventually had a ceremony there that was like this, an important event to witness. It was like this, a moving event of reconciliation. It was an event in which UBC came to terms with its history of engagement in injustice. So I find this, not just this event now, but the two events to be striking in their parallelism in many ways. And I should note that Mary is serving right now as an advisor to our program on Asian Canadian Studies, serving as an elder, as a mentor for many of the students, providing a kind of intergenerational continuity that's so important communities who have suffered trauma and displacement. This ceremony in social work is going beyond, and indeed the agreement itself is going beyond what many of our units have done so far. It is social work taking an active leadership role in the changes to which we'd like to see happen. And it's important that social work do this. I recall, and I love that they are acknowledging history. I recall a documentary I had seen not too long ago in which by this point, a middle-aged Indigenous man was recounting in excruciating detail the memory of the day in which the RCMP showed up at his door when he was a small boy with social workers. This stuck in his brain to remove him from the house and essentially to break him from any contact with the family for almost the rest of his life. This history in which social workers served through much of the period of the residential schools and the 1960s, the infamous scoop, is essentially extensions of the state and of religious authorities. We can trust in the discipline of social work and in it as a discipline. And also this period created among many Indigenous individuals in Canada a deep distrust of educational institutions. So it's important that an educational institution like UBC comes together with social work to think about a different kind of future, not which breaks vividly with this history of atrocity and which breaks with a collective history of trauma. This trauma, of course, as we all recognize, and as the TRC has noted, created a ripping apart of families, a destruction of the fabric of communities, a disruption of the intergenerational continuity and connectivity, essentially a kind of culture side, which we are all engaged in trying to bridge and to heal at this point. This led to an epidemic of addiction, abuse, and suicide. The statement of accountability and commitment signals a fierce commitment to co-create a future with Indigenous peoples, to help heal the past, to promote social justice, reconciliation, Indigenous sovereignty, and more. I couldn't be prouder of the role of the School of Social Work in taking this step. I and I think all of your colleagues at the university want to walk this path with you. And we once again thank the important work of the Indigenous Advisory Council and look forward to a very different future. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Dean Averill. And thank you to each of our distinguished speakers for their thoughtful words. I will now ask Director Donna Baines to read the School of Social Work Statement of Accountability and Commitment to Indigenous People.
Thank you, Sabine. And thank you to our distinguished speakers for bringing in this moment with us so strongly. As we have mentioned, this past year was the 90th anniversary of the School of Social Work, which we used as an opportunity to look forward and backward to assess our successes and learn from our mistakes in the tradition of critical reflexivity that is central to our discipline. When we look back over our many years of research and education, we have many things to be proud of. We have done a good job and we landed on the right side of history. But regrettably, and with deep shame, we can also identify moments where we failed to embrace a sufficiently critical and in-depth analysis and unintentionally ended up standing on the wrong side of history. We acknowledge that there were times in this school that we did not instill sufficiently critical skills in our students so that they could resist oppressive policies and advocate for change. And so some of our graduates worked in concert with state and religious policies that harmed many groups of people, including LGBTQ+ people, women, people with disabilities, Indigenous people, racialized people, and others suffering from long-term injustice and inequity. As the new co-editor of the British Journal of Social Work argues, the prevailing approach in social work history is to ignore the profession's complicity or at least acquiescence in acts of state violence and institutionalized oppression. One side of social work's history, he says, inflicted unspeakable damage on some of the most vulnerable people in society. In Canada, a particularly grim phrase of oppressive social work practice included participation in the apprehension of First Nations children and their placement in residential schools, the 60s scoop, as well as ongoing problems in the delivery of fair, anti-racist, and equitable child welfare services. Our school is very fortunate to have an Indigenous advisory circle, and at the initiation of Bernadette Spence, the advisory circle, consisting of Bernadette Spence, Richard Vadan, Doris Fox, Roberta Prince, Bruce Robinson, Jennifer Lee Coble, and faculty members Ashley Quinn, Yu Yan, Marie Nightbird, and myself, developed a statement that then was circulated and discussed through the many bodies of the school and is now ready for presentation to you today. We view this statement as advancing the UBC Indigenous Strategic Plan, as well as the goals of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Statement of accountability and commitment to Indigenous people. The School of Social Work at the University of British Columbia declares its commitment to progressive recognition of and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that our building rests on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territory of the Musqueam people. We further acknowledge and respect that the Jack Bill School for Social Work building, as well as the degrees, research, programs, and services we provide, are in the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples. Schools of social work in Canada are aware of the depth of the deleterious impact that colonial actions, legislation, policy, and institutions, including residential schools and child welfare systems, have had on Indigenous people. And we remain committed to critically and reflexively understanding social work and our school's role in past injustices, and to working to move forward for a better future. This includes, but is not limited to, building a strong capacity in students, staff, faculty, and researchers so that they can assess, critique, and resist policies and practices that are colonial, unjust, and unfair. The School of Social Work is committed to playing our role in addressing the calls to action that have been made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We further acknowledge that the school teaches social workers who will work in many different areas of society, and that we are in a position to uphold the spirit and intent of the TRC calls to action, particularly 92.3, provide education on the histories of Aboriginal people, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. This will require knowledge and skills-based training in intercultural work, conflict resolution, human rights, and anti-racism. And point 19, to close the gaps in health and well-being outcomes between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal communities. We are committed to developing and sharing program models, tools, and resources that will improve Indigenous people's access to the School of Social Work's degrees, research programs, and services. And to building and enhancing Indigenous community research capacities. We will work reciprocally with Indigenous communities to ensure that they have an active presence in our school if that is what they desire. And we are committed to learning from Indigenous knowledges and practices and to incorporating them into the teachings and work of the school. In terms of research, we endorse the principles of ownership, control, access, and possession, or OCAP, and respect the relationship of Indigenous people to their cultural knowledge, data, and information. We further recognize the responsibility of researchers to participate in knowledge mobilization back to Indigenous communities and peoples in a gentle, respectful, and good way. In addition, our commitment includes decolonizing direct social work practice to address the ongoing oppression of Indigenous people in order to move forward in a good way, and to improving the place social work has in Indigenous communities. Our vision includes fostering a connection between social workers and Indigenous people to offer time and space for Indigenous people to show us how to support them in taking the lead in healing from colonial effects of social work practice, and to uplift and empower Indigenous people to reclaim sovereignty. The School of Social Work is committed to progressively moving beyond a statement of reconciliation to the development and implementation of an action plan, which will be reviewed regularly in the spirit of social justice, equity, an ethic of care, inclusiveness, accountability, and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I will now be turning over the MC's microphone to my friend and colleague, Daryl Gray. Daryl earned a master's degree in social work at UBC last year. He is currently an Indigenous PhD student with the UBC School of Social Work. Daryl.
Got to unmute. But thank you, Sabine, for your great emceeing job. I'd like to thank Dr. Donna Baines for hosting this important event. Thank you also to our elder, Doris Fox, and our other dignitaries for starting us off in such a good way. My name is Daryl Gray. My bloodlines are, my mother is Tsimshian from Lac Willems, and my father is Oglala-Sioux Lakota from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. I will be introducing several additional speakers that the School of Social Work has invited today. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we have asked these Indigenous social workers to speak briefly to us about their experiences at UBC's Point Grey campus. Today's first speaker is Dr. Richard Vadan. Dr. Vadan is a member of the Niskonov Band of the Secwepemc First Nations. He graduated with an MSW from the UBC School of Social Work in 1973. During his time as an associate professor at the UBC School of Social Work from 1994 to 2014, Dr. Vadan also held appointments as the director of the First Nations House of Learning, and he also served as the first senior advisor to the president on Aboriginal Affairs. He was a faculty lead with the UBC School of Social Work and Squamish Nation's pilot BSW program in the early 2000s. Dr. Vadan is currently an elder scholar and a member of the Indigenous Advisory Committee. Let us please welcome Dr. Vadan.
Wekwa Kaselton, Shrub Ken. Doris, thank you for your welcome to the territory. I am a guest here, being from the Shuswap, but as I've mentioned a number of times, my great-grandfather, Johnny Peters, was from Swattle, just down the road, and it's an honor to circle with you, and I thank all the people who've been fifth business getting this important day underway. The statement of accountability and commitment not only reflects the work of the current Indigenous Advisory Committee, but also is the culmination of the work of numerous committees of community members, students, staff, and faculty over the course of the school's history. And in my recollection, that goes back to when I was a student here from 71 forward, back in the day when we were Native Indians, and the chair of the committee was Dr. Mary Russell, and other committees that involved Catherine McCannell, Paul McNichol, Betty Carter, and many of the students. I do want to take a moment here. I'm reminded how we're a very small community and we are circles within circles, and that struck me when our other MC, Ms. Bruyere, was introduced. I had occasion to work with probably one of your relatives of the Manitobain Brotherhood, and Doris Young Fontaine, who was a sister of one of our dear departed elders, Dr. Rosin Eng, who passed away just recently, and who served at UBC as the health coordinator for student services and was the mentor for many students. Back to the statement. It is like the medicine wheel. It is inclusive, ongoing, encouraging cycles of holistic, culturally congruent, critical examination and insight in response to the TRC's calls to action, and it will serve as the foundational elements as the school moves forward on the next steps of its journey. When I embarked upon the 2-year MSW in 1971, I was a captain in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I'd had 2 years of experience as a social worker, having been reassigned from being an air nav to a social work officer in 1969. My clinical practice at that time included marital family counseling, child welfare, mental health, and development of a drug and alcohol treatment program for the Army, Air Force, and Navy at a time when what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder was referred to as shell shock or lack of moral fiber, and self-medication through beverage alcohol was encouraged. At the time I began as a student, the 2-year BSW program had the choice of focusing on casework, group work, or community organization with courses in human behavior, policy, research, and electives in one areas of practice focus. Elements of social work practice, relationship with self, other, and community, for me throughout my career had been the stepping stone or the fundamental theoretical elements where I've been working one-on-one with groups, with organizations, at policy, at increasing levels. And I found those elements of relationship, holistic relationship, to be a touchstone and a good point of reference. When I embarked upon the graduate student program, I didn't realize I was also embarking upon a more personal cultural journey as I came in touch with my Shuswapan roots, as I became acquainted with my Shuswap relatives in the interior of BC. My paternal great-grandparents, my grandparents, and my father were all survivors of the residential school. In 1929, 1930, when this UBC school was being opened, my father was a resident, Hector was in the Caribou Indian Residential School in Williams Lake. His experience was such that in 1940, he left his home territory, joined the Canadian Army, served in Italy, Holland, and Germany, and did not return for 30 years with my mother Mary, an English war bride, and my younger brother and 3 younger sisters. In working with families, communities, organizations at all levels, I've learned that in any social group there are formal rules. Sometimes those are written down, and informal rules, which while not written down usually are more powerful than the formal rules, whether it be in a family or within an organization. At a very early age, I learned that one of the rules in my family origin is don't ever speak of anything about being Native, even in response to someone questioning, why is your skin a dark color? It was just a look from my father, Hector, who let us know, don't go there. His shame and anger was such from his time in the residential school. Tikakukpi tells us we have people put in our path to help us at times we need them. 2 of those individuals were UBC graduates, Jack Young, who was a BSW graduate in 1948, Ben Shad, also UBC, also faculty member, both World War II vets, Air Force and infantry. Jack was my clinical supervisor in the military, Ben was my supervisor. They were both my father's age, had similar experience in the military. With them, it was okay to talk about what does it mean to be Native Indian. They encouraged such talk. They encouraged that extended family. They encouraged it to the point that in 1968, I was able to talk with my father about it, or 1998, beg your pardon, to the point where my father Hector sat in the sweat lodge at the Longhouse with us and was able to talk about, it had been 60 years from the time he'd last been in the sweat lodge. Along the way, through the course of my career as a clinician, as a social work educator, program director, I've had the fortune of meeting many people, whether in Manitoba, across the prairies, One of the first two social workers I met, Native social workers, as we were in the early 70s, was Bill Mussell, who will be speaking with us tonight. I met him at a conference in Edmonton, and Marlene Castellano-Brandt at a Canada Council of Social Development, and recalling speaking with Marlene that we were the only 3 or so social workers we knew at the time that were First Nations or Native Indians in Canada. So it is incredible when I look in any school across Canada, we don't only students, we have graduates, we have program directors, we have deans of social work programs who are First Nations, Inuit, Métis, Indigenous. I think back to the history of the school, it takes more time than I'm allowed to look at some of the very positive effects. In 1969, the Social Workers Act was implemented in British Columbia. The school was in the forefront with continuing studies programs, working with the Board of Registration to upgrade students. Two of those RSW graduates come to mind, Rose Point and Musqueam, who took the upgrading and maintained that throughout the course of her career. Gloria Wilson of the Squamish First Nation, who was the director of the program for decades and also was very instrumental in establishing the pilot program. I've had experience, I think I was encouraged by Marie to talk about what is the highlights, and there are many. I've been blessed with many. Some of the highlights are working with Graham, Dr. Joan Archibald, Rod McCormick, Eduardo Val, as we were part of an Aboriginal Capacity Development Research Group, having grants. We had, I think, $8 million worth of grants in the early part of the new millennia, which we made into fellowships for graduate students. Many of those students have gone on to complete master's and doctoral programs and now instructing in schools. I'll say a few more words. Some of the, and I'm now, this is not unique to myself, that every so often I'll be in an airport or on a transit or just bump into somebody somewhere who had been a student or a member of a program, and we catch up with what they've been doing. And they say, do you remember when? And most times I don't, but as they help me along, we remember the experiences and what we shared during the course of our conversations. The other special occasion with highlights is that when I was director of the First Nations House of Learning, I had the privilege and honor of welcoming people to Stuyvesant, and I would do that with my older brother, Musqueam Elder Larry Grant, and I would tell the story of the Poles, the teachings of the Poles by Lyle Wilson, Susan Point. I'm going to get myself in trouble here, Walter Harris and Rodney Haltsuck, Haida Poles. And each time I told that story, I would learn something new because I would see them in another dimension. And each time we read the statement of acknowledgement and commitment, there'd be more layers, more insights to develop and new ways to implement and take the action towards the realization and put into practice the calls to action through the TRC in a way which is intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and physical. It is wonderful to spend this time with you. Thank you for your time and listening. Kukstam, all my relations.
Thank you, Dr. Vadan, for sharing those important comments with us today. The next speaker is Dr. Heidi Hansen. Dr. Hansen is Cree on her mother's side from the Whitefish Lake First Nations in Alberta, and Danish and German from her father's side. She graduated with a BSW in 1996 and an MSW in 2001 from the UBC School of Social Work. Dr. Hansen taught in the UBC School of Social Work and Squamish Nation's pilot BSW program in 2004. She was also a counselor with the Pacific Spirit Family and Community Service program that was associated with the UBC School of Social Work in the mid-1990s. I'd like to say, here you go, Dr. Hansen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really would like to thank the Indigenous Advisory Committee and the School of Social Work for the invitation to speak today. I acknowledge that I'm a visitor to this territory. I have lived, worked, studied, and played on the traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people for the past 30 years. For the past 13 years, I have been in private practice working with our people. The UBC School of Social Work Statement of Accountability and Commitment is, from my perspective, recognizing and understanding how our shared history can inform a different future together and continue the work of reconciling healthier relationships between social workers and Indigenous people. It will take time and considerable effort to rebuild this trust. The time and effort are worth it. A teaching that I have learned from many healthy elders over the years is to speak from your heart. I would like to start by sharing a story about a woman that I knew. This woman gave birth to 7 children with 5 different men. She raised 2 of her 7 children for the first 4 and 6 years of their lives. This woman served time for attempted manslaughter along with other criminal activities. She was addicted to alcohol and lived in a place similar to the downtown East Side in Vancouver. At this moment, I would like you to reflect on your thoughts and feelings about the woman I just described. What if I added that this woman was a residential school survivor? What does this mean to you? Finally, I would like to share that this woman was my mother. She was born Mariah Dora Breast from Whitefish, formerly Goodfish Lake First Nation in Alberta, and attended Poundmakers Residential School. Today, I link my late mother's behaviors and actions to the trauma she experienced in residential school. I recognize her personal history as one that was negatively influenced by the Canadian political and colonial systems that also affected our ancestors and family members. I have shared my mother's experiences with both Indigenous people and a few others outside of our community. Most have expressed genuine understanding, relatability, and compassion. Some people outside of our communities have expressed judgment and little to no understanding of her experiences. If you feel what I would term negative feelings or thoughts about me, my mother, or my family, I would say this to you: this is your problem, and I will not make it mine. This has been a powerful shift in my life. What I know today is that I have reconciled my inner self. Reconciliation for me, first and foremost, is awareness of the relationship each of us has with self. How did I begin to reconcile the negative feelings and thoughts I once felt when the other spoke of our people in the most pejorative way? It began with teachings from many people over the course of my lifetime, and also with post-secondary education. In particular, I will now discuss what I have learned from four social workers, 2 Indigenous and 2 allies. In 1999, I learned from Dr. Richard Vadan that it is wise to continue the practice of lifelong learning. This also means reading and critiquing other viewpoints to understand. Dr. Vadan also spoke of the importance of thinking for oneself. In 1994, I learned from Heather Whiteford, an instructor in the School of Social Work, that it is respectful to be mindful of our lens, our perspective, and how we see the world and how we impact others. In 1993, I learned from Dr. Michael Yellowbird in this School of Social Work the importance of empowering the people we work with. As well, I learned from Dr. Michael Yellowbird the importance of self-care practices, in particular meditation. Finally, I learned from Alex Elgard, my clinical supervisor in private practice, the importance of emotional healing. Alex defined emotional healing in 2011 for me in these 4 steps. Number 1, the willingness of the individual to take ownership of the problem. Number 2, the individual, with the help of others, creating a different understanding about their behavior and feelings. Number 3, the individual, with the help of others, changing destructive behaviors and distorted beliefs. And number 4, beginning to practice those changes in the world. When I think of my mother's life, there were few cultural appropriate resources for her to effectively deal with her trauma and to explore in a non-judgmental way her personal thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Today, there are resources available that were not available in my mother's time. In reconciling relationship with self, we can all access learning through others. This includes people who trigger us, books, formal education, and many, many other ways. The lens that I use today in my private practice and how I view the world has been shaped by many of the wonderful Indigenous people I have worked with over the years. We have laughed, cried, and prayed in my office. I have also had people sing to me. Each person has come to therapy for their own unique needs. I've experienced many joyful moments with our people in the following ways. When they know they can think for themselves and question their truth while challenging what others have told them to believe. When they can take action and practice good decision-making in their personal care, self-care, with their boundaries and living a balanced life, forming healthy relationships. When they have the ability to recognize that they have personal power. When they can own that they have a problem and work to resolve the problem. When they can understand the devastating effects of our shared history and how this has impacted them as individuals, as family, and community members. When they believe and know they are worthy, lovable, and good enough. Each person I have worked with is reconciling their personal thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in order to live better lives. Many seek to understand the cruelty and violence done to them. Over the years, I have listened to our people and would like to remind all social workers, social work students, and our allies to commit to understanding how trauma continues to weave its way into our daily lives. I ask that if you meet or know someone like my mother, you look beyond the behavior and remind yourself that trauma has hijacked the person and who they once were. What you don't know about my mother is that she had an excellent sense of humor, which I believe I inherited, but my adult children don't believe that. She was known for being a free spirit, and I believe she did a great job of raising me every day for the first 4 years of my life. Soon after, the old coping ways of using alcohol came back into her life to numb her painful memories. I would now challenge each and every person listening to begin the process of reconciliation with self. Review what you like and what you don't like in your relationship with self and in your relationships with Indigenous people. Find someone you trust to share your most sacred thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, and begin your personal journey to reconciling our shared history. Ask yourself if you truly accept others, or do you merely tolerate the other? The ongoing action items that will be added and implemented in the UBC School of Social Work in creating recognition and reconciliation for Indigenous people are needed and justified. We can learn and grow from each other if we remain open and curious. In the area of direct social work practice, I would like to see the following changes. I would like social work students and those in the workplace to learn from our elders and our people about working with Indigenous people in culturally appropriate and safe ways. I would like more education for social workers around the debilitating effects of trauma, and I would like social workers to recognize the intergenerational effects of colonization for our people. In closing, I would like to personally thank all social workers and colleagues who have made a conscious effort in working to better the lives of our people. In particular, I want to thank Indigenous social workers who work in mainstream organizations. Thank you.
Jan Wanakum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hansen, for sharing your reflections with us today. The final speaker for this event is Dr. Bill Mussell. Dr. Mussell is a member of the Squaw community within the Stolo Nation. He graduated with a BSW in 1963 from the UBC School of Social Work, and he is the school's first Indigenous graduate. I would like to introduce Dr. Mussell.
Thank you very kindly. I'll be pleased to add some additional introductory comments at the end of my presentation. I was quite conscientious about the outline that Marie provided, and I will begin by talking about reflections that apply to the statement of accountability and commitment. I view the statement of accountability and commitment of the UBC School of Social Work from the perspective of a First Nations person of Stolo ancestry and heritage who complemented a Bachelor of Arts degree and with the BSW in 55 years ago. While I support the school's commitment to progressive recognition and recognition with Indigenous people, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, I have concerns that I will represent by identifying what I consider to be good cultural ways of our ancestors. One, community and family are the core values of Indigenous cultures, not rights of the individual. Two, Mother Earth and humankind were created by the Great Spirit to sustain life in perpetuity. Strength and security of their connectedness is in the best interests of the world. Three, Indigenous languages and ways of life are taught by collectives in their natural world. Teachers are those who have lived and learned what they possess as knowledge and model a desired way of life. Four, our educators build upon the knowledge that learners bring to the teaching, learning situation or circumstance. The approach is strengths-based. Six, five, to indigenize ourselves, our knowledge keepers, elders, healers, language speakers, and leaders need to lead our way on our own culture-based ways, ensuring we are part of the web of life. Number six, an Indigenous view of life is to seek relational values: openness, sharing and caring, humility, and respect, and therefore the importance of human connection to family, community, land, and all of creation. And seven, a healthy person is the sum of all of their relationships with creation. I have three highlights I want to share, one chosen in each of the three periods of life that I identify with my trajectory of life as an adult, from 1960 to 1980 to 1980 to 2000, and from 2000 to 2021. I will attempt to tell the story of change spanning two generations: changes in Indigenous self-government, wellness practices, health and education, created by a talented team of Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal leaders in academic, mental health, education, and community development. Highlight number one, from wardship to family and community restoration. Reality of our lives in the 1950s was shaped by the Indian Act and its administration by the Indian Affairs branch of the Government of Canada. At that time, our bands or local governments were being run by an Indian agent who called meetings, chaired them, did minutes, wrote resolutions, and actioned them. I graduated from high school in 1958. Concurrent with starting studies at the university, I joined the newly recreated North American Indian Brotherhood, serving as secretary-treasurer and helping to organize community meetings, facilitating discussions, and engaging in research regarding desired changes to the Indian Act and related matters. Evidence of progress, 1, changes to the Indian Act were submitted to the Government of Canada. 2, bans or First Nation funding to support delivery of local government services in British Columbia is well accepted. 3, rejection of the white paper and presentation of the red paper. 4, federal funding to support creation and operation of the National Union Brotherhood and its member regional and territorial organizations is taking place. What do I look forward to at this stage? I look forward to First Nations as self-governing communities. Highlight 2, community building based on Indigenous cultural foundations. Development work in the 1970s moved our First Nations closer to understanding the importance of self-government, the need for administrative, management, and planning skills, and knowledgeable and skilled service providers. Calls for contractors familiar with writing and teaching curricula in fields of local governance, community health, education, addictions, and social development caught my attention. I did graduate studies in adult education and became a self-employed consultant in the early 1980s. Progress, evidence of progress. I reached and published papers regarding Indigenous children and youth, and with 2 colleagues published Making Meaning of Mental Health in First Nations, as well as researching a curriculum study for modern day First Nations community health practitioners. We also created the Salish Institute Society, an Indigenous-led, managed, and staffed health education and addiction services center. I served as its principal educator and manager. 3, the Aboriginal Healing Foundation was established. It focused on the healing of traumatic effects of residential schooling, supported research, related research, and undertook program evaluations and explored truth and reconciliation in a few of its publications. They were very generous in all of their publications and made them available to our organizations like the North American Indian Brotherhood, the First Nations Agency, and made copies available at all of our conferences. Where do I look forward to at this stage of my journey? The acknowledgement and celebration of Indigenous science as the acknowledgement and celebration of Indigenous science as a legitimate science. And the final highlight I want to share is the promotion and implementation of innovative mental health and wellness services. Realities of the 2000s, I would say, are described as First Nations communities are being left with the immense problem of restoring and revitalizing their communities, heritages, languages, and economies. Thanks to Marie Baptiste for this particular statement, because that, to me, summarizes the essence of the reality. Progress, evidence. First name, excuse me, I had a drink of water. Evidence of progress. First Nations members are breaking the silence, talking more openly about serious problems with alcohol, physical violence, addictions, diabetes, heart trouble, early death, sexual abuse, and are calling for support. At its annual national conferences for the Native Mental Health Association of Canada, features of grieving, healing, whole health, and wellness sessions were always provided. I was proud to serve as its president for more than 20 years. I also served as chair of the First Nations Inuit Métis Advisory Committee of the Mental Health Commission of Canada from 2007 to 2011. The First Peoples Wellness Circle, responsible for 69 wellness teams across the country, partnered with the National Native Addictions Partnership Foundation to create the Thunderbird Partnership Foundation, dedicated to the conception, development, and implementation of the First Nations Mental Wellness Continuum Framework, and is currently in the process of creating an evaluation methodology firmly grounded in Indigenous values and factors. Culture is the foundation for the framework. These 2 national Indigenous organizations continue to be a priority in my work. I look forward to discovering that the First Nations Mental Wellness Framework is bringing about the desired wellness outcomes in our First Nations. A couple of additional comments. I was born and raised in a First Nations community where I lived my first 8 years of life. My father was of the community, and my mother was a child of immigrant people who had moved to Saskatchewan in the late, in about 1915. And they left Saskatchewan in 1929 during the Depression and suffered pretty rough times. And it wasn't, she said, until she met my father in the Fraser Valley in the late 1930s and got to know his family that she felt she really belonged somewhere because of the nature of the love and acceptance and understanding that she experienced with the family, and ended up, really what it ended up with me as her first child. She ended up learning how to be Stolo in her early years while she was trying to raise me, and I was trying to learn to be Stolo as well, and discovered that in many ways, because when I eventually got to public school and my parents paid tuition fees for us to go there because we lived on reserve, I discovered I was well prepared to do well in the school system, and found that what I was able to do was to translate and interpret what I was being taught into the language I learned in my own village. And as I got into high school, I would type up my own science labs and other course materials that offered a lot of new material. And again, did that translation and interpretation so that I was always able to communicate in the language that I understood. And found that I did that right through most of my first degree in university. And found that methodology worked really well. I have 2 daughters. My second daughter is in a graduate program learning how to create our traditional language. My other daughter is doing grad studies at the University of Victoria. And I find being a father of 2 daughters like that and a wife who is a professional and the president of the Child and Family Service Agency, that I'm always engaged in ongoing issues regarding the health and wellness of our families, and certainly recognize in no uncertain way how critically important the cultural foundation is to anything and everything we do as we work towards making the changes necessary for us to enjoy the kind of good life that we all dream about. Thank you kindly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mussell. Your words carry much meaning for us all, and we are grateful for having you share them with us here today. Dr. Mussell was our final respondent for this event today. In keeping with Indigenous protocol, I would now like to offer the sincere thanks of myself and Sabine to all of today's speakers, as well as the faculty and staff of the School of Social Work, who did so much work to prepare and organize for today's event. Had this been an in-person event at the House of Learning or a feast hall, rather than a Zoom gathering, we would now be calling today's speakers onto the platform and presenting them each with a token or gift of our appreciation. However, in lieu of a handshake or a hug and a gift bag, the School of Social Work has made arrangements to forward along some special gifts out to the presenters through the mail. I would also like to thank Marie Nightberg for her work on this event together over the past year, Dr. Monty Montgomery for his work on this event since his arrival at our school in August, and to the Indigenous Master's student, Hallie McLennan, for her work on preparing the slides that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. I will now turn to our host, Dr. Donna Baines, for our concluding remarks. Introducing Dr. Donna Baines. You're welcome.
And thank you so very much to everyone for joining us here today. I think we're in many ways just overwhelmed by the commitment and interest in our statement of accountability and commitment. And we very deeply appreciate you sharing this moment for us. It is a very important moment in the life of our school and in the life of our discipline to acknowledge errors of our past and to move on with some energy and confidence into the future. I would like to especially thank our student MCs, co-MCs, Sabine Bruyere and Daryl Gray, as well as our university dignitaries, President Ono, Provost Cersey, and Dean Averill. And of course, to our special guests, Elder Doris Fox, Elder Scholar Richard Vadan, Dr. Heidi Hansen, and Dr. Bill Mussell for their wisdom and kindness in sharing their thoughts and reflections with us today. You honor us all with your presence. We will now be turning again to Dr. Bill Mussell for his closing words.
Thank you, Doctor. The theme that runs so strongly through the remarks of all of the speakers on this panel emphasizes the strength of living in the relational ways is, as we continue to make a living and move forward today, and is particularly important in circumstances where people of Indigenous background have run into difficulties, feeling the effects of trauma and other difficulties, and how critical it is that that relational dimension of their reality be honored and respected and shared with them as we do what we can to provide services and assistance. The same kind of respect is critical as I think about working together as partners in making change, with the lead being taken by the Indigenous people who have dreams and sometimes need to be encouraged to articulate what that is. But as one works with people in that way, or who function in that way, to use their voice and move forward, it's absolutely critical that the same kind of relational ways be given as support. I'm impressed with the strength of the theme of culture and the importance of honoring the ways of life passed on to us by our ancestors, and hope and pray that as work continues on this project regarding accountability and commitment and reconciliation with the Indigenous community, that those values and ways of living will be honored to the fullest extent. And that we always remember that the voices that really count are the members of the community who keep the community together and ensure that the land is taken care of, because all children of the future, as we think about 7 generations in time to come, land is a critical element to ensure that all will be able to enjoy being part of the web of life. So with that, thank you. Thank you for inviting us and for making this a celebration, and may it be the beginning of a number of activities that will be able to be benchmarks in the progress being made by the people like yourselves and those you work with to bring about the reconciliation you describe. All my relations, thank you.
Thank you everyone for speaking and for joining with us today. That's the end of our presentation. Invite you to look at our website of the School of Social Work going forward for the strategic plan, the work that we will be coming out of this accountability and commitment statement. And we look forward to staying in strong relations and good relations with you going forward. Thank you very much for attending today. We're now, that's it for today. Thanks. Take care now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Are you still here, Bill? Or hi, Jennifer Lee. Hi.
I can hear you.
Great, I can hear you too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was wonderful. Oh, look at all these kids waving. There was about, Bill, I don't know if you can still hear me. I think we had about 108 people.
Oh, yes.
At one point, I think that was the highest number that I saw, which that was more than I expected considering today is election day and
Oh, yeah, yeah.